Lightning split the darkening sky, illuminating a scene that defied comprehension. 8-year-old Emma Matthews stood alone on the cracked asphalt of an abandoned gas station. Her small figure seemed tiny next to 5 huge men in leather jackets adorned with patches of snarling wolves. The rain had plastered her honey-blonde hair to her pale face, but her chin remained defiantly raised despite the metal brace visible beneath her soaked jeans. "That puppy doesn't belong to you," Emma's voice cut through the thunder. Her finger pointed at a wire cage where a German shepherd puppy cowered, whimpering. The largest biker, their leader, crouched down to her level. His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Go home, little girl. This isn't a place for kids playing hero." Emma didn't flinch. Instead, she widened her stance, compensating for her uneven posture. "Heroes don't always wear capes," she said, repeating words her father had once told her. "Sometimes they wear braces." The biker's hand moved toward the cage, triggering something unexpected. A low, blood-chilling growl from the shadows behind the ruined building. The bikers froze, their attention shifting from Emma to something behind them. In that electric moment, no one dared to breathe. Then, a pair of amber eyes materialized in the darkness, followed by the powerful silhouette of an adult German shepherd. The dog's teeth gleamed white as lightning flashed again. But what happened next left the bikers, Emma, and perhaps even fate itself utterly speechless. At just 8 years old, she had already endured more grief than most adults. 3 years ago, she lost both her adoptive parents, Mark and Sarah Matthews, respected K-9 police dog trainers, in a devastating highway crash that shook the community. Now living with her elderly grandparents, Robert and Martha Wilson. In the small town of Pinevale, Emma faced life's hardships with quiet determination. Born with a partial leg deformity, she relied on a metal brace that drew unwanted attention from school bullies. Yet beneath her fragile appearance beat the heart of a warrior, one whose empathy extended far beyond human connections. Animals, especially dogs, seemed to recognize something special in her, a kindred spirit who understood without judgment. Her father's portrait, standing with his K-9 unit, was a constant reminder of the love she'd lost too soon. At the opposite end of Pinevale's social spectrum, the Steel Wolves motorcycle gang had recently arrived, their presence unsettling the sleepy town. Their leader, Ray Blackwell, carried himself with the hardened authority of a former military man. His weathered face gave little away, but those who looked closely might catch glimpses of personal tragedy. His 7-year-old daughter had died of leukemia 5 years earlier. Among his men was Troy Parker, whose quiet reluctance to participate in the gang's darker activities hid his true identity. An undercover detective investigating the illegal dogfighting ring the Steel Wolves had expanded into. The economic downturn had left Pinevale's industrial sector in ruins, creating fertile ground for crime. The forest surrounding the town, however, concealed a remarkable survivor, Athena, a highly trained K-9 who had avoided human contact since the accident that took her handler's life. The puppy now in the biker's possession, one they called Scout, bore the distinctive ear markings linking him to Athena's noble lineage, a heritage that would soon intertwine the desperate threads of a story no one in Pinevale could have foreseen. Emma was walking home from Pinevale Elementary when she heard it, a faint whimper beneath the drumming rain. Most kids had been picked up by parents in warm, dry cars, but Emma's grandparents could no longer drive in bad weather due to arthritis. "I'm not made of sugar," she had insisted that morning. "I won't melt in the rain." Her path home took her past Hartman's abandoned gas station, a relic of better days. Normally, she hurried past the crumbling building with its broken windows and graffiti-covered walls. But today something made her stop. A sound, barely audible beneath the rain. A whimper. Emma hesitated, glancing at the darkening sky. "Grandma will worry if I'm late," but the sound tugged at something deep inside her. Tightening her backpack straps, she crept toward the side of the building, her brace creaking faintly in the damp. Inside the old gas station, the air was thick with the smells of motor oil, mold, and cigarettes. As her eyes adjusted to the dim light, she heard men's voices coming from what had once been the repair bay. Hiding behind a rusted tool cabinet, She watched as 5 bikers clustered around wire cages, each holding a terrified German shepherd puppy. The largest man, the one she recognized as the gang's leader, pointed at one cage in particular. This one's got the markings. Perfect for the ring. Emma's hand flew to her mouth. The puppy's ear bore the same star-shaped pattern her father had proudly pointed out in photos of his K-9 partner. This wasn't just any puppy. This was Athena's pup. "When's the fight?" asked a thin man with a patchy beard. "Saturday. Johnson's bringing his champion. Bets are already at $5,000. Emma couldn't stay silent. The thought of this beautiful puppy being forced to fight, to kill or be killed, overwhelmed her 8-year-old sense of caution. She stepped out of hiding. "You can't do that. It's wrong. And illegal." 5 heads snapped toward her. The leader recovered first, his initial shock twisting into something dangerous. Well, a little spy." He stalked toward her. "This ain't no place for stray kids." Emma swallowed hard but stood her ground. "Dogs aren't for fighting. They're meant to be loved." The man laughed, a sound that sent chills down her spine. "And who's gonna stop us? You and your fancy leg brace." The other bikers chuckled, all except one, a younger man who watched Emma with something like concern. "I'll tell Sheriff Parker," she threatened, though her voice trembled. "By the time Parker checks this place, we'll be long gone with the dogs." The leader loomed over her. "Now scram, kid, before you get hurt." Emma shook her head, planting her good foot firmly. "Not without that puppy." She pointed straight at the cage with the star-marked pup. "He doesn't belong in a fighting ring." The leader's amusement vanished. "You got 5 seconds to disappear, kid." "Ray, hold on," the quiet biker interrupted. "She's just a kid. Let me walk her out." "Stay out of it, Troy," Ray snapped. "Kid needs to learn not to stick her nose where it don't belong." As Ray advanced, Emma backed up until she felt the cold wall behind her. But she refused to look away from the puppy, whose soft brown eyes seemed to beg for help. Then, something extraordinary happened. From outside came a long, low howl that cut through the rain. The bikers froze. "Probably just a stray," one muttered nervously. Ray shook his head. "No stray sounds like that." He turned back to Emma. "Last warning, kid. Get lost." The sound of shattering glass interrupted him. A blur of wet fur and muscle burst through the side window. A fully grown German shepherd, teeth bared in a snarl that made every hair on Emma's neck stand on end. Water streamed from the dog's dark coat as she positioned herself between Emma and the bikers, her stance unmistakably protective. And then Emma saw it, the same star-shaped marking on the dog's ear. "Athena?" she whispered. The dog's ears pricked at the sound of her name. In that frozen moment, no one moved. Then, with sudden purpose, the shepherd advanced toward the cages. The younger biker, Troy, moved, but not to stop her. Instead, he unlocked the cage door, giving Emma a barely perceptible nod. "Take him and go. Now." Emma didn't hesitate. She grabbed the puppy and bolted for the exit, Athena keeping the bikers at bay with her snarling presence. None of them realized, as Emma vanished into the storm with Scout, that this rescue was only the beginning of a story that would forever change Pine Vale. When Emma burst through the front door of their modest bungalow, soaked to the bone and clutching a shivering bundle of fur, her grandmother's exclamation died in her throat. "Emma, you know we can't keep a dog. Grandpa's allergic." "Please, Grandma," Emma begged, water pooling around her feet. "He needs help. Bad men were going to hurt him." The puppy whimpered as if understanding he was the subject of debate, his wet nose pressing into Emma's neck. The star-shaped marking on his ear seemed to glow against his dark fur. Martha hesitated, torn between instinctive boundaries and the desperation in her granddaughter's eyes. From the living room, Robert Wilson's gruff voice called out, "Martha? Is that Emma? She's late. I was about to call Sheriff Parker." "She's home," Martha called back, her eyes still on the puppy. "We'll handle this." With a sigh, she grabbed a stack of old towels. "Put that creature in the laundry room to dry off. Then we'll figure this out." Emma's relief was palpable as she hurried to the back of the house, still cradling Scout. Martha followed, her arthritic hands trembling slightly. Under the laundry room light, the puppy's condition became clear. Though no more than 12 weeks old, his ribs protruded starkly beneath his matted fur. A thin rope burn circled one front paw, and a small cut on his muzzle had crusted over with dried blood. "They hurt him, Grandma," Emma whispered, her voice breaking. "They said they'd make him fight other dogs." Martha's expression hardened as she gently wrapped the puppy in a towel. Against her better judgment, against Robert's allergies and their limited means, something about this situation felt different, important. "Let me fetch some warm milk," she muttered. "Then we'll see what your grandfather says." Though they both knew Robert's initial reaction would be refusal. When Martha left to prepare for that particular battle, Emma knelt beside the makeshift bed they'd created. The puppy weakly licked her hand, his brown eyes eerily intelligent. "I'll name you Scout," she whispered, "and I promise no one will ever hurt you again." Rage reached its boiling point. The remaining steel wolves stood at a safe distance as their leader hurled tools against the wall, his face flushed with fury. A damn kid waltzed in here and took $5,000 worth of merchandise." Troy maintained careful neutrality as Ray raged, though inside, his thoughts raced. As an undercover detective embedded with the Steel Wolves for months, he'd been gathering evidence on the dogfighting operation. Emma's appearance had nearly blown his cover, but he didn't regret helping her escape with the puppy. "We'll find her," offered Diesel, a hulking biker. "Town this size, a kid with a leg brace won't be hard to spot." "I'll handle it," Troy cut in. "Less suspicious if I ask around the usual kid hangouts." Ray studied him with narrowed eyes. Something about Troy's behavior during the confrontation had felt off, but he couldn't pinpoint what. Finally, he nodded. "Have answers by tomorrow." His gaze flicked to the now empty cage, and for a fleeting moment, something like recognition flickered across his weathered face, that same star-shaped marking. Troy caught it, that brief glimpse of softness, but Ray's expression hardened again. "Find her. Find the dog." As he turned away, Troy noticed him secretly pulling a worn photograph from his wallet. A little girl with honey blonde hair, not unlike Emma's. Emma sat by her bedroom window, watching raindrops trace silver paths down the glass. Her confrontation with Grandpa had gone exactly as predicted, initial refusal, then reluctant compromise after Martha's quiet intervention. Scout could stay the night, but a decision would need to be made tomorrow. Her thoughts returned to the adult German shepherd who'd appeared so mysteriously. Had she imagined Athena's reaction to her? Athena, her father's partner, had vanished after the crash 3 years ago, yet the markings matched perfectly. And something in those amber eyes had felt hauntingly familiar. Movement in the yard caught her attention. Emma pressed closer to the glass, squinting through the rain. There, beneath the old oak tree, stood a dark silhouette, the unmistakable shape of a German shepherd. The dog stood perfectly still, amber eyes fixed on Emma's window. Water streamed from her powerful body. Emma gasped, her heart pounded. Without thinking, she opened the window a few inches. "Athena?" she whispered into the night. "Is that really you?" The dog's ears pricked at her voice. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then, with clear purpose, the shepherd approached the house, moving like a shadow beneath Emma's window. In the dim light from her bedroom, Emma now saw what she'd missed at the gas station. Half hidden by thick fur around the dog's neck was a tarnished metal tag, the emblem of a K-9 police unit, still faintly visible despite years of exposure. "It is you," Emma breathed, tears welling. The dog whined softly in response, a sound that seemed to bridge 3 years of separation. Inside the house, Scout began whining from the laundry room, sensing the presence outside. Emma glanced anxiously at her bedroom door, afraid the noise would wake her grandparents. When she looked back, Athena had vanished into the shadows. But Emma knew with absolute certainty the dog hadn't gone far. Something extraordinary was happening, something tying her father's past, the mysterious present, and her own uncertain future together. Closing the window against the rain, Emma felt a strange mix of fear and hope. Tomorrow would bring trouble. But for tonight, at least Scout was safe. And somehow, impossibly, Athena was watching over them both. Emma stood nervously before Miss Abernathy's third-grade class, carefully holding Scout. For today's community helpers presentation, she began, her voice quiet but firm, I want to talk about animal rescue. 20 pairs of curious eyes watched as Emma shared a carefully edited version of Scout's rescue, omitting the scarier details about the bikers but emphasizing the importance of protecting animals from cruelty. Miss Abernathy's expression shifted from initial surprise to growing concern as Emma described the bad people who'd kept Scout in a cage and the mysterious mama dog who'd helped save him. Emma, the teacher gently interrupted when Emma finished. Is this a true story or something you made up? A wave of giggles passed through the class but was quickly silenced by Miss Abernathy's sharp look. It's true, Miss Abernathy, Emma replied, lifting her chin at the same defiant angle she'd shown the bikers. Scout has rope burns where they tied him up. And Grandma says I can keep him if we find him a good vet. The last part stretched the truth at best. Grandma's agreement had been reluctant and burdened with conditions, but in 8-year-old determination, those details seemed unimportant compared to Scout's immediate safety. When his receptionist informed him of an urgent visit, a little girl with a rescued puppy and a rather alarming story, he agreed to see them despite the late hour. His kind eyes crinkled with genuine warmth as Emma entered the exam room, Martha Wilson hovering anxiously behind her. So this is the brave fellow I've heard about, Dr. Cooper said, gently lifting Scout onto the table. His experienced hands moved methodically over the puppy's body, pausing at each sign of neglect or abuse. German Shepherd, about 12 weeks, malnourished but not critical. Minor signs of rough handling. He glanced at Martha. Miss Abernathy mentioned some concerns about how this pup was acquired. Martha sighed, her wrinkled hands twisting. Emma says she rescued him from bikers who had him caged at Hartman's old station. Says they planned to use him for dogfights. She lowered her voice. She also claims an adult German Shepherd helped her. Possibly her late father's police dog. Though that seems impossible. Dr. Cooper finished his examination, his expression thoughtful as he studied Scout's distinctive ear markings. Perhaps not entirely. He reached for Scout's chart, making notes. I occasionally worked with Officer Matthews' K-9 unit. His partner, Athena, if I recall correctly, had unique markings very similar to this pup's. He met Emma's eyes directly. Athena was never found after the crash. Most assumed she died in the wreck or ran into the woods. Emma's face lit up. It is her. I saw her last night in our yard, watching the house. Dr. Cooper and Martha exchanged glances that clearly conveyed adult skepticism, but the vet chose his words carefully. German Shepherds are remarkably intelligent and loyal. Stranger things have happened. He turned his attention back to Scout, administering vaccines and cleaning the rope burn on his paw. I'll treat this little one free of charge. Consider it my contribution to animal welfare in Pinevale. His expression grew more serious. But Emma, if what you're saying about dogfighting is true, we need to tell Sheriff Parker. Emma's momentary joy faded. They'll come looking for Scout. They said he's worth a lot of money. Dr. Cooper's manner didn't change, but something hardened in his eyes. Then we'll make sure you and Scout are protected. What none of them realized as they left the clinic was that news of Scout's rescue was already spreading through Pinevale's tightly knit community, reaching both sympathetic ears and dangerous ones. In a grimy back room of the rusty chain bar that served as the Steel Wolves' makeshift headquarters, Ray Blackwell slammed his fist on the table, rattling empty beer bottles. You're absolutely sure? Troy nodded, his expression carefully neutral despite the tension coiling inside him. Finding Emma's identity had been inevitable. His main concern now was controlling how the Steel Wolves would react. Emma Matthews, lives with her grandparents, the Wilsons, on Maple Street. Her father was. I know who her father was, Ray interrupted, his voice strangely quiet. Mark Matthews, K-9 unit. The other bikers exchanged puzzled glances at their leader's reaction. Worked with him on a case years back, Ray muttered, seeming lost in memory. Before things went south, before his daughter's death, before grief consumed him, before he traded his law enforcement connections for a life of crime. Diesel broke the awkward silence. So what's the plan, boss? We need that dog back. Johnson's expecting the pup for Saturday's fight. Ray's expression darkened. We'll get the dog. He turned to Troy. Keep watching the house. Learn their routine, when the grandparents leave, when the kid's alone. Something in his tone made Troy's instincts flare in warning. Ray wasn't just planning to retrieve Scout. There was something personal here. Something potentially explosive. That night, Troy made a risky call from a payphone miles outside Pinevale. The situation's escalating, he told his handler in a hushed voice. Blackwell's fixated on the kid. There's history here beyond what's in his file. He listened to his supervisor's cautious response, frustration growing. No, I can't maintain cover any longer without participating in retrieval ops. That means exposing a child to risk. A pause. Then, reluctantly, understood. 72 hours. He hung up, the weight of his dual identity pressing harder than usual. They needed 72 hours to gather final evidence before the planned raid on the dogfighting ring. 3 days during which Emma and Scout remained vulnerable. As Troy balanced his precarious position, Emma lay awake in her bedroom, the day's events spinning in her head. A sound at the window drew her attention. A soft scraping that might have been tree branches in the wind, if not for the lack of wind tonight. Carefully, so as not to wake Scout, Emma crept to the window and peered out. Athena sat in the moonlight, her amber eyes reflecting like twin flames in the dark. This time, Emma didn't hesitate. She quietly raised the window and whispered, "Wait there." Minutes later, sneaking down the creaky stairs with practiced stealth, Emma slipped out the back door into the yard. Athena remained perfectly still as the child approached. Not retreating, not advancing. "You remember me, don't you?" Emma whispered, stopping a respectful distance away. "You remember Dad, too." At the mention of Mark Matthews, Athena's ears pricked up. Slowly, with the caution of approaching a wild creature, Emma reached out. "I won't hurt you. Promise." What happened next would stay with Emma forever. Athena closed the distance between them in purposeful strides and gently pressed her muzzle into Emma's outstretched palm. The contact sent a wave of recognition through Emma. This wasn't just any dog. This was her father's partner. As Emma stroked Athena's thick fur, her fingers found the half-hidden tag around the dog's neck. She could barely make out the inscription. "You've been out here all alone," Emma whispered, tears welling. "All this time." Athena whined softly, an almost human sound of acknowledgement. Then suddenly she went alert. The dog's head snapped toward the street, her posture instantly shifting from relaxed to protective. Emma followed her gaze and caught a flash of chrome in the moonlight. A motorcycle slowly cruising past the Wilson house, its engine barely idling. The rider's face was hidden by a helmet, but the wolf emblem on his jacket was clearly visible. Athena's body tensed. A low growl built in her throat. Emma placed a restraining hand on the dog's shoulder, suddenly afraid. "They're watching us," she whispered. Athena's continued vigilance confirmed her fears. Scout's rescue hadn't gone unanswered. The wolves were circling. The motorcycle disappeared around the corner, but the sense of threat lingered in the night air. Emma looked into Athena's alert eyes. The dog's gaze seemed answer enough. Emma's grandparents received an anonymous phone call warning them to return what isn't yours, prompting a frightened Martha to contact Sheriff Parker. The sheriff, a good-natured but overworked man in his 50s, listened to their concerns with professional patience but limited alarm. "Probably just kids playing pranks," he assured Martha, making perfunctory notes in his pad. "But I'll increase patrols in your area for a few days." His dismissive attitude shifted slightly when Emma specifically mentioned the steel wolves, linking them to suspected dogfighting activity. "Dogfights, you say?" Sheriff Parker's expression sharpened. "That's a serious accusation, young lady. You're sure of what you saw?" Emma nodded firmly. "They had cages with puppies. They said scouts from fighting bloodlines and worth a lot of money. The sheriff's gaze lingered on Scout, who'd noticeably improved under Emma's care. "I've had my eye on those bikers since they rolled into town, waiting for something concrete." He knelt to Emma's level. "You did right telling me, but I need you to be careful. Stay home, keep doors locked, and call me immediately if you see those men again." What he didn't tell them was that he'd received confidential word of ongoing undercover operations targeting organized dogfighting rings in the county. Operations that might involve the very bikers Emma had encountered. While the adults discussed heightened security measures, Emma's thoughts were elsewhere. Dr. Cooper had confirmed what she already knew in her heart. Scout was almost certainly Athena's offspring, likely part of a litter born in the wild before being captured by fight organizers. The biological connection explained Athena's protective behavior and opened new possibilities in Emma's mind. If Athena recognized her bond with Scout, and perhaps with Emma herself, maybe the dog could be persuaded to return from her wild existence. The idea of reuniting her father's beloved partner with her pup, of creating a whole family again, took root in Emma's imagination with the persistence only a child's dreams can sustain. The chance to test this theory came sooner than expected. 2 days after Sheriff Parker's visit, Robert Wilson suffered a minor injury requiring a trip to Pinevale's main hospital. Though not serious, doctors wanted to keep him overnight for observation, especially given his history of heart problems. Martha, torn between staying with her husband and returning home to Emma, finally agreed to a compromise. Emma would stay with their neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, an arrangement that satisfied everyone except Emma herself. "I'll be fine at home, Grandma," she insisted as Martha packed an overnight bag. "Scout will protect me." Martha cupped Emma's face in her wrinkled hands. "I know you're brave, sweetheart, but you're still only 8. Mrs. Peterson expects you at 6 for dinner. I'll be home tomorrow afternoon." Her expression softened. "Scout can come too." Mrs. Peterson already agreed. What Martha couldn't know was that Emma had no intention of going to Mrs. Peterson's. A plan had been forming in her head since discovering Athena's identity. A plan to bring the dog home where she belonged. As her grandmother finished packing, Emma carefully prepared a small backpack with dog treats, her father's old police whistle, a flashlight, and Scout's leash. The moment Martha's car disappeared down Maple Street, Emma would have roughly 30 minutes before she was expected next door. 30 minutes to venture into the wooded area behind their house where she believed Athena had made her den. But Emma wasn't the only one watching the Wilsons' departure. From a parking lot 2 blocks away, Troy Parker watched the elderly woman drive off, his stomach knotting with dread. Ray had given the order that morning. Retrieve the dog today, while the grandmother was at the hospital. The raid on the fighting ring was scheduled for tomorrow night. Too late to stop the steel wolves from breaking into the Wilson home. For as long as he could, Troy stalled, inventing mechanical troubles with his bike, volunteering for a supply run to the next town over. But now, watching Martha's car turn the corner, he knew his options had dangerously narrowed. He was about to reveal himself and summon immediate police protection for Emma when he noticed something that froze the blood in his veins. Ray's distinctive motorcycle already approaching the Wilson house. They'd suspected Troy of stalling and decided to act without him. Even as he started his car, Troy knew he wouldn't reach Emma before they did. Emma tucked Scout into her backpack and whispered excitedly, "We're going to find your mom today. Your real mom." The German Shepherd puppy, now noticeably healthier and more energetic under Emma's care, wagged his tail enthusiastically. Emma checked the clock. 25 minutes until she needed to be at Mrs. Peterson's. Enough time for a quick expedition to the forest's edge where she'd spotted Athena several times. Scout trotted obediently behind her despite lacking formal training, and they stepped into the late afternoon sun. Gathering storm clouds on the horizon seemed a fitting metaphor for the converging forces about to collide in the quiet backyard of 3177 Maple Street, forces that would forever alter the lives of a brave little girl, 2 remarkable dogs, and a community that had forgotten how to stand against the darkness together. The impending storm painted the sky in shades of slate and charcoal as Emma led Scout toward the tree line behind the Wilson property. In her determination to find Athena, Emma failed to notice the unusual silence that had fallen over the neighborhood. No playing children, no humming lawnmowers, as if the entire street sensed the impending clash of forces. She had just reached the first cluster of trees when Scout's behavior abruptly changed. The puppy's playful demeanor vanished. He froze, ears pinned back, a low growl building in his throat. "What is it, boy?" Emma whispered, her hand automatically reaching for the comforting touch of his fur. The answer came in the roar of motorcycle engines, their aggressive snarl cutting through the afternoon stillness. Even from the forest's edge, Emma could see 3 bikes turning with deliberate slowness past each house until they reached the Wilson residence. When she recognized the lead biker as Ray Blackwell, his imposing silhouette unmistakable even at a distance, her blood ran cold. "They've come for Scout." Her first instinct was to run deeper into the woods, to hide until they gave up and left. But a crushing realization stopped her. She'd left the back door unlocked in her rush to find Athena. If the bikers broke in and couldn't find Scout, they might damage her grandparents' home out of spite. The thought of adding that burden to Martha and Robert's already difficult lives was unbearable. With wisdom beyond her years, Emma made the harder choice. "Come on, Scout," she whispered, turning back toward the house. "We need to get inside and call Sheriff Parker." The puppy seemed reluctant to go, digging in against some unseen danger ahead, but Emma's gentle insistence won out. They crept along the tree line, using the neighbors' hedges as cover, approaching the house from the side. Just as the 3 bikers dismounted in front of the Wilson home, Emma reached the back door, seconds before Ray pounded on the front, his forceful knock echoing through the empty house. She slipped inside with Scout, quickly locking the door behind her, and hurried to the old rotary phone in the kitchen. Her trembling fingers had just begun dialing when a sharp crack from the front of the house made her freeze. The sound of splintering wood. "Diesel, take the back!" Ray's command rang out. "The dog's gotta be here somewhere." Heavy footsteps moved through the living room as Emma desperately searched for a hiding place. The laundry room offered the only viable option, a small space with 1 window and a sturdy door. Gathering Scout into her arms, she quietly hurried to the laundry room, shutting the door just as Diesel's massive frame appeared in the kitchen. Inside the cramped space, Emma's mind raced. The window was too small for her to climb through, especially with her brace, but maybe Scout could escape. Yet even as she formulated the thought, she knew she could never bring herself to abandon the puppy she'd sworn to protect, and Scout was too young to survive alone. Instead, she braced herself against the door, one hand covering Scout's muzzle to keep him quiet, the other groping for anything that could serve as a weapon. Her fingers closed around the handle of her grandfather's heavy flashlight, its weight scant comfort. The laundry room door shuddered as Diesel tried the knob, finding it locked. "In here, boss," he called. "Something's locked in the laundry room." Emma pressed harder against the door, knowing her slight frame offered meager resistance against a determined adult. Then her father's voice sounded suddenly clear in her memory. "Sometimes being brave doesn't mean not being scared, Emma Bear. It means doing what's right even when you're terrified." The door shook again under another powerful blow. Scout began growling despite Emma's restraining hand, his puppyish sounds more touching than threatening. Another thunderous kick, and the door frame cracked. The lock barely held. Then silence. Emma held her breath. The door burst open with a splintering crash, revealing Ray's looming figure. His eyes widened slightly when he saw her. Well, the kid is here," he announced, his tone oddly muted. "With the dog." The pressure on the door eased momentarily. "Open up, girl," Ray said, his voice strangely softened. "We ain't gonna hurt you. Just want what's ours." Emma clutched Scout tighter, raising the flashlight with a shaking hand. "He's not yours. You were gonna make him fight other dogs. That's cruel and illegal." A pause. Then Ray spoke again, quieter. "Listen, kid Emma, right? This don't gotta get ugly. That dog's worth serious money to folks who know its value. Your grandparents could use that cash for your medical bills or that fancy leg brace." The crude attempt at negotiation ignited something fierce in Emma's chest. Scout isn't property. He's a living, feeling being who deserves love. Her voice rose with conviction. "My dad was a policeman. He taught me animals deserve our protection. He'd never let you take Scout, and neither will I. The mention of her father seemed to trigger something in Ray. The door stopped shaking as his silhouette slightly retreated. Your father, Mark Matthews. Emma nodded, confused by the sudden shift. He worked with Athena, Scout's mom. An unexpected silence fell over the house, broken only by distant thunder rolling closer. Ray spoke again, and something had changed in his tone. Your father pulled my daughter from a wreck 5 years ago. She didn't make it, but he stayed with her, held her hand until... His voice cracked. Emma's grip on the flashlight loosened slightly at this revelation from her former enemy. The fragile moment shattered when Diesel's impatient voice cut through. Ray, what's the holdup? Johnson's expecting that dog tonight. Bets are already placed. Before Ray could respond, a sound sliced through the tension. A sharp crash followed by the front door being thrown open with such force the whole house shook. Police! Nobody move! Troy Parker's voice rang out, no longer hiding his undercover identity. The sudden intrusion left the biker's path blocked by 2 uniformed officers. At the same moment, through the laundry room window, came Athena. Glass exploding around her powerful frame as she landed with military precision between Emma and the approaching threat, teeth bared in a snarl that transformed her from pet to primal protector. Her body became a living shield before the child and puppy. The timing was too perfect to be coincidence, as if the former police dog had been watching and waiting for precisely this moment to make her stand. Diesel stumbled back, genuine fear replacing his usual aggression. What the hell is that? Troy, now openly identified as Detective Parker, entered the hallway with weapon drawn, assessing the extraordinary scene. On the ground, now, hands where I can see them, while Diesel and the third biker were momentarily distracted, not by the police but by the remarkable sight in the laundry room. Emma on her knees beside Athena, one arm still protectively around Scout. The family resemblance between the 2 German shepherds was unmistakable. Their matching star-shaped ear markings were like a signature of shared lineage. That's Officer Matthews K9, Troy said quietly. Ray seemed to pale. The one that disappeared after the crash, yeah. Troy filled in the blanks. Never found. Presumed dead. Something in the biker leader's weathered face shifted, recognition, remorse, then something like resolve. We're done here, he said quietly, raising his hands in surrender. The kid was protecting what needed protecting. Something I forgot how to do. As the officers moved to secure the bikers, Troy approached Emma, maintaining a respectful distance from Athena's defensive perimeter. Emma? You okay? Emma nodded, a strange calm replacing her earlier fear. We're fine. Athena wouldn't let anyone hurt us. She looked at the detective with sudden recognition. You're the biker who helped me at the gas station. You opened Scout's cage. Troy nodded. Been undercover with this dogfighting ring for months. Never expected to find Officer Matthews' partner. She was declared dead years ago. His gaze moved to Athena with professional admiration. I've never seen a bond like this. Emma stroked Athena's rain-damp fur. She's been living in the woods behind our house, watching over Scout, and maybe me too. The arrival of additional police cars filled Maple Street with flashing lights. Neighbors emerged onto porches, drawn by the commotion, among them Mrs. Peterson, who'd grown worried when Emma never arrived for dinner. Inside the Wilson home, the immediate danger had passed, but the situation remained delicate. Animal control had been notified about the confiscated fighting dogs, including Scout. Standard procedure required both Scout and the presumed feral Athena to be taken to the county facility for evaluation, a prospect that filled Emma with fresh horror. You can't take them? She insisted when an animal control officer appeared in the doorway. Scout belongs to me, and Athena belongs to Scout. Her small face set in stubborn lines reminiscent of her father's determination. Their family. Detective Parker exchanged a look with the animal control officer, a silent professional communication passing between them. Jim, give us a minute, he requested. The other man reluctantly nodded and stepped out, leaving Troy alone with Emma and the dogs. Emma, there are procedures we have to follow, he began, crouching to her level. Athena's lived wild for years. They both need proper evaluation by professionals. My dad was a professional, Emma countered, her voice firm despite threatening tears. He trained Athena to protect people. She's not just some stray. Troy studied the incredible family unit before him, the grieving child, the dog that had literally returned from the dead. Standard procedure seemed utterly inadequate for this situation. The German Shepherd remained alert beside her granddaughter. The sleeping puppy, the shattered glass and splintered door frames. Athena, your father's dog. Martha began, disbelief warring with the evidence before her eyes. But that's impossible. She vanished after the crash. She found her way back, Emma said with childhood's unshakable faith. For Scout. And for me. Detective Parker stepped forward, offering Martha his badge. Mrs. Wilson, I'm Detective Troy Parker. I've been undercover dismantling this dogfighting network. Your granddaughter's intervention saved this puppy from a terrible fate, but it also put you all at risk. He gestured to the entrance where Ray and the others were being escorted to patrol cars. These men broke in looking for the puppy. If Athena hadn't appeared when she did, he left the consequences unspoken. Martha slowly sank into the nearest chair, her legs suddenly unsteady. All this happened while I was gone. While Emma was supposed to be at Mrs. Peterson's. Her gaze sharpened accusingly at her granddaughter. You never went next door, did you? Emma dropped her eyes, guilt momentarily eclipsing her triumph. I was going to, but I wanted to find Athena first. Then I saw the bikers coming, so I hid here with Scout. She looked up, wisdom beyond her years shining in her eyes. I couldn't let them damage Grandpa's house, Grandma. Not after everything you've done for me. Martha's expression softened, pragmatic care replacing anger. She reached to touch Emma's cheek but hesitated when Athena shifted position, a low growl emanating from her throat. A sound not quite aggressive but clearly establishing boundaries. She's still half wild, Detective Parker explained. She's accepted Emma but will need time with others. He cleared his throat, professional duty compelling him to continue. Mrs. Wilson, I have to inform you that Animal Control insists both dogs be taken to their facility for assessment. Given the circumstances. A surprising voice interrupted. That won't be necessary. Ray Blackwell's voice carried from the hallway, where he stood flanked by two officers, preparing to escort him to a waiting patrol car. Rain dripped from his leather jacket, giving him a defeated look at odds with his reputation. I'd like to make a statement about these dogs. Officially. All eyes turned to the biker, confusion evident on every face except Emma's. She alone didn't seem surprised by this unexpected intervention, as if she'd seen something in Ray the others had missed. 3 years ago, after Officer Matthews' crash, Ray began, his voice rough with emotion. His department declared his K-9 partner Athena missing, presumed dead. 6 months later, a hunter reported seeing a German Shepherd with police markings in the woods outside Pinevale. The department did a brief search but called it off. He took a deep breath. I was the one who spotted her next, about a year ago, while scouting locations for the puppies. A surprised whisper escaped Martha's lips. Ray continued, his gaze locked on Athena. I recognized her immediately, knew those pups would have exceptional bloodlines for our purposes. I monitored the litter, waiting until they were old enough to survive without their mother. Then I took them. All except Scout, who escaped during capture. Judge Halloway, a stern woman in her 60s with a reputation for fair but unyielding judgments, interrupted sharply. So all puppies rescued from your operation are Athena's offspring? Progeny of a police dog? Yes, Your Honor. But there's more. Ray shifted uncomfortably. Seeing Scout get rescued, seeing Athena appear to protect them both, I realized we weren't just seeing a mother protecting her young. We were seeing a trained police dog still doing her duty. His words settled over the room like dust after an explosion. Sheriff Parker stepped forward, professional interest peaked. You're suggesting Athena has been functioning as an unofficial K-9 officer all this time? I'm saying that dog never stopped being a police dog, Ray confirmed. The training, the discipline, it's all still there. You saw how she reacted when Emma was in danger. That was years of police work hardwired into her DNA. He turned to Martha, his expression unexpectedly softening. Your son-in-law's partner never abandoned her post. She's been guarding what he left behind. His daughter. Martha's hand flew to her mouth. Tears welled in her tired eyes. Ray's narrative transformed Athena from a wild animal who'd coincidentally helped Emma into a loyal officer whose bond with the Matthews family had transcended even death. It presented the relationship between Emma and the dogs not as childish fantasy, but as a natural continuation of a connection that outlasted tragedy. Ray wasn't finished. He addressed Judge Holloway again, his voice gaining an unexpected note of humility. Your Honor, I've done plenty wrong in my life, especially after losing my daughter, but I know something about redemption and second chances. He gestured toward the window where morning sunlight illuminated Pine Vale's modest skyline. The prison system has these programs, therapy dogs for inmates. Animals that help the most broken people find something worth saving in themselves. His voice grew rough. I'm requesting that Athena and Scout be legally recognized as the property and family of Emma Matthews under the guardianship of Martha and Robert Wilson. I'll provide written testimony about their lineage and Athena's continued service to this community. Judge Holloway studied the man before her, decades of judicial experience allowing her to see past the criminal record to the complex human making this unexpected declaration. Mr. Blackwell, while I appreciate your willingness to provide this information, disposition of the dogs falls under animal control's jurisdiction, not criminal court. With respect, Your Honor, Sheriff Parker interjected, there's precedent for judicial intervention in cases involving service animals. Athena could be classified as a retired police K-9. Different protocols would apply. The legal discussion might have continued but was interrupted by Detective Troy Parker's sudden appearance in the chamber doorway, his expression urgent. Apologies for the intrusion, Your Honor, but I have urgent evidence pertaining to this case. He approached the bench, presenting a flash drive and folder of documents. Full records recovered from the Steel Wolves operation, including breeding documentation and sales records. He glanced at Ray. Evidence corroborates Mr. Blackwell's claims about Athena and her pups. Additionally, I've taken statements from Officer Jensen and 2 others who worked with Officer Matthews and Athena. All confirm the dog's distinctive training markers. Judge Holloway examined the evidence, her expression thoughtful. After a long silence, she looked up at Martha. Mrs. Wilson, legal technicalities aside, do you and your husband feel capable of caring for these animals, given your granddaughter's attachment to them? Martha straightened in her chair, finding unexpected strength despite exhaustion. Your Honor, my husband and I have concerns about our age and health, but we've learned something important these past days. Just as they need her, they're her connection to her father. She dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. As for whether we can manage, this community has shown us we're not alone. She listed the offers of support. Dr. Cooper providing discounted vet care, Emma's teacher organizing a fundraiser for backyard fencing, even Mrs. Peterson, who disliked large dogs, volunteering to walk Scout when Emma was at school. Judge Holloway nodded, assessing Martha's sincerity. Then she turned to Detective Parker. And animal control? Jim Caldwell at Animal Control will defer to the court's decision, Troy replied, especially given the extraordinary circumstances and the dog's lineage. Judge Holloway made her decision with swift certainty. I hereby classify Athena as a retired service animal and Scout as her dependent offspring. Guardianship is granted to Emma Matthews under the care of Martha and Robert Wilson, pending formal review next month. She fixed Ray with a stern look. Mr. Blackwell, your testimony today will be noted in your case file. While it doesn't excuse your criminal actions, it speaks to character that will be considered at sentencing. As guards prepared to return Ray to custody, he spoke directly to Martha. Mrs. Wilson, if Athena makes it, tell Emma some debts can never be repaid, but they can be honored. Her father's kindness to my daughter. I won't forget that again. When Martha left the courthouse, her step was lighter despite physical exhaustion. With the legal path now clear, one pressing worry lifted from her shoulders. She hurried back to the veterinary clinic, eager to share the news with Emma, only to find the waiting room abuzz with an excitement she couldn't immediately comprehend. Dr. Cooper emerged from the treatment area, his expression a mix of professional astonishment and heartfelt joy. Mrs. Wilson, just in time for a miracle. He ushered her to where Emma sat beside Athena's treatment table, the change in the dog's condition immediately obvious. Though still on 4 fluids, Athena's eyes were open, alert, and focused on Scout, who enthusiastically licked his mother's muzzle. Her fever broke about an hour ago, Dr. Cooper explained, checking the monitors. Her body's finally responding to the antibiotics. I've never seen such a dramatic turnaround. It's like she just decided she wasn't ready to go. Emma looked up at her grandmother, pure joy lighting her tired face. She heard us, Grandma. She chose to stay. With the wisdom of children who faced mortality too soon, she added softly, Dad would want her to live, not follow him. Martha knelt to embrace her granddaughter, sharing her own unexpected news. The judge said they can stay with us, Emma. Both Athena and Scout. Officially part of our family now. She stroked Emma's hair, gently adding, And Mr. Blackwell asked me to tell you that your father's kindness has been honored. Emma's brow furrowed slightly at this unexpected message from their former enemy, but she seemed to intuitively understand its meaning. Dad always said kindness makes waves that keep spreading even when we can't see them anymore. She turned back to Athena, whose amber eyes now tracked every movement with that familiar alertness, the same look she'd given Mark Matthews on countless patrols. Some bonds, it seemed, even death couldn't sever. A sturdy fence now enclosed the Wilsons' backyard, its construction a weekend project that had drawn volunteers from across the neighborhood. Officer Jensen and his teenage sons, Dr. Cooper and his staff, even Mrs. Peterson, who, despite her fear of large dogs, had brought lemonade and sandwiches for the workers. The old shed in the corner had been converted into a spacious doghouse with insulation and separate beds for Athena and Scout, though Emma insisted both dogs slept in her room most nights. Inside, the house itself seemed brighter somehow. Robert Wilson, recovering from his fall with renewed purpose, had tackled long-delayed repairs with unexpected vigor. Martha's initial concerns about accommodating 2 German shepherds in their modest home had given way to grateful recognition of the structure and routine the dogs brought to their lives. Scout's puppy energy forced daily walks despite Robert's arthritis, and Athena's protective presence allowed Martha to sleep soundly for the first time since taking custody of Emma after the accident. Most remarkable was the change in Emma herself. The quiet, withdrawn child who'd struggled to connect with classmates now moved with new confidence. Her academic performance improved dramatically, and Miss Abernathy reported her becoming an active participant in class discussions, especially those about animal welfare. The bullying that had once shadowed her school days ceased completely, partly due to her classmates' revised perception of her as the brave girl who'd stood up to dangerous men, and partly due to Athena's occasional appearances at school events, her dignified bearing and police pedigree commanding respect. 6 months after the confrontation at the Wilson home, Pinevale's town council convened to discuss several proposals arising from the events surrounding Emma and the dogs. Sheriff Parker, recently promoted after successfully prosecuting the dogfighting ring, presented the first agenda item. The department proposes creating an official foster program for retired police K-9s. He explained to assembled council members and community residents. These dogs often struggle transitioning to civilian life. We believe a structured system for their care and continued purpose would benefit both the animals and our community. The motion passed unanimously, with the Wilson home designated as the program's first official foster residence. Athena, now fully recovered and formally classified as a retired service animal, was reinstated with the honorary position of K-9 ambassador for Pinevale Elementary, where she and Emma participated in monthly educational sessions about responsible pet ownership. Scout's development proved equally impressive. Under Athena's guidance and Emma's devoted care, The once terrified puppy had grown into a confident young dog with exceptional temperament. Recognizing Scout's gentle nature and intuitive sensitivity to human emotions, Dr. Cooper suggested training him as a therapy dog. By autumn, Scout completed his certification and began weekly visits to the pediatric wing of Pinevale General Hospital, where his playful demeanor comforted children facing illness and medical procedures. The transformation extended beyond immediate family. Ray Blackwell, serving a reduced sentence negotiated through his cooperation with prosecutors, enrolled in a newly created prison rehabilitation program working with dogs. Some debts can never be repaid, he wrote in a letter to Emma from prison, but they can be honored every day by how we choose to live. As adults drank coffee and children played on new playground equipment donated by a community fund, Emma slipped away to a quiet park bench overlooking a pond. From her backpack, she pulled the latest letter from Ray, this one about a rescued fighting dog he was training to become a service animal for veterans. Athena settled beside her, a dignified presence, while Scout bounded over moments later, his youthful energy the perfect complement to his mother's steady seriousness. Emma hugged them both, breathing in the scents of autumn leaves and the faint piney aroma of the shampoo Dr. Cooper recommended for their coats. "Emma," Martha called from the crowd. "The mayor wants a photo with you and the dogs for the town newsletter." "Coming, Grandma," Emma replied, rising from the bench. As she turned to join the celebration, she paused, struck by a moment of perfect clarity. Despite her youth, the path from that rainy day at the abandoned gas station to this sunny morning in the new park hadn't been smooth or straight. It had been marked by fear, pain, near tragedy, and unexpected alliances. Yet here they stood, not just surviving but thriving. Athena on her left, the limp from her injury barely noticeable now. Scout on her right, his star-marked ear twitching occasionally. And Emma herself moving between them, her own limp no longer a source of shame but simply part of who she was. The girl who'd saved a puppy from bikers and, in doing so, helped heal an entire community. Sheriff Parker approached with a soft smile. "Your father would have been incredibly proud of you," he said, his uniform a reminder of the law enforcement legacy connecting her past to present. Emma looked at him, wisdom beyond her years shining in her eyes. "He used to tell me love is the bravest thing of all," she replied. "I think maybe he was right." Around them, Pinevale continued its quiet transformation, not into a perfect town without problems or pain, but into a community that remembered how to protect its most vulnerable and recognized that family sometimes comes in the most unexpected forms, on four legs or two, carrying legacies of love forward into an uncertain but hopeful future. In the twilight of our lives, we often reflect on what truly matters. A little girl rescuing a puppy reminds us that bravery knows no age, and family extends beyond blood ties. Like Emma, many of us face unexpected losses and struggle to find meaning afterward. Her story shows that even in our darkest moments, new connections can form, ones that heal old wounds. The bond between Emma, her grandparents, and these remarkable dogs reflects the unexpected joys that can emerge in our later years when we remain open to new possibilities. For those feeling isolated or doubting their purpose, remember, your kindness creates waves that continue long after you're gone. Just as Mark Matthews' compassion lived on through his daughter and his K-9 partner, your legacy isn't defined by titles or possessions, but by the lives you've touched and the love you've shared. It's never too late to build new connections, stand up for what's right, or welcome unexpected joy into your home.